I hope, yeah, it's 6 p.m. so you have to start. Nobody has yet joined, but yeah, let's start. This will be recorded anyway. So, okay. Let me share my screen. Okay, let's get started. Okay, welcome to week 2 of the computational systems biology course. So last week we talked about different caveats of systems biology and why we use it and what kind of research goes into it. And in the next few classes, we'll be talking about different concepts, different angles to which systems biology is looked at. Today's session is more focused on networks and network biology. So, in this session, we'll be mostly focusing on different types of networks, how we define networks, what are the different parameters of a network, and how we can extract information from a network. And yeah, so ha- uh, in general, we'll talk about networks and also we'll talk about how networks in biology look like, different types of networks, metabolic and gene regulatory and those kind of networks. So this is like a part of it will be in this session, a part of it will be in the next one. Okay, so let's get started. So networks or graphs, how do we define it at first? So a graph is basically a set of nodes connected by a set of edges. So each of these nodes represent a particular element. In our cases, in biological sense, it would be more like, if it's a metabolic network, your nodes will be individual metabolites or individual enzymes, and the edges connecting two nodes will denote a relationship between these two metabolites or enzymes. So this can be gene regulatory networks as well, so where each of your nodes will be different genes or transcription factors, and connections between these nodes will depict a relationship or some sort of regulation between regulation at interplay between these two different genes or transcription factors. So we can have directed or so these are the different types of graphs that we generally encounter. In the next slide, I'll show you the visual representation of each of these types of graphs. So we have undirected graphs. Undirected graphs, which are basically denoted by single connections between a set of uh, uh, vertices, which are basically nodes, and so yeah. So we can have undirected graphs where there is no directionality involved between two different nodes. The edges are just a mode of connection between these two types of nodes. And also on the other hand, you can have directed graphs where you have edges representing the arrow of representing the direction of this relationship. So a type of an example of an undirected graph would be gene co-expression networks. So where basically uh, different types of genes, how are they regulated by different types of transcription factors, and how each of these genes regulate each other. And directed graphs would be some sort of, like, say, pathway networks or some sort of biological relationship in which there is an element of inhibition and activation involved. So on top of that, there can be weighted graphs, which will denote that there will be some weight carried on by these different types of edges, uh, and the weights of these edges will denote the strength of the relationship between these two types of nodes. On top of that, you have bipartite graphs where you have undirected graphs, and there's like the graph is divided into two sets of vertices or two sets of nodes. So, for example, in a metabolic network or a gene disease network, so you'll have nodes which are represented by genes, and you'll have nodes which are represented by diseases. Now, genes and diseases are two different types of elements of the whole network. So, but they are connected by each other by different sets of vertices or edges. So, in those cases, we have two different types of elements that are represented by nodes in the graph. So, we call them bipartite graphs. On top of that, you can have different types of on different caveats of these graphs, so multi-edge hypergraphs and trees, etc. We'll talk about it in the next slide. So here are visual representation of different types of graphs. So on the first left hand side you have uh, so I think okay, let's start from D. So basically, first three we are not concerned about here. Let's start from the fourth diagram. One second. Yeah. So this uh, panel D shows an undirected graph. So you have five nodes here, one, two, three, four, five. They're connected by different edges, but these edges do not have a directionality associated with them. This just shows that one node has a relationship with the other. What kind of relationship, and if there is a directionality involved in it, that is not specified. So these are known as undirected graphs. If you add directionality to the edges, for example, in the E panel, you have graphs which are directed graphs. So you have a directionality involved here. So from three, the third node, uh, you have connections to one and two, uh, also four and 1, 2, and 4, and these are three outgoing edges from the node 3, and for the node 3 there is sorry, four outgoing edges, 1, 2, 4, and 5, all are outgoing edges from node 3, and there is one incoming edge from into node 3, which is from node 5. So when there is a directionality involved with the edges associated with these with the nodes, we call them directed graphs. So yeah, now let's skip semantic graph. It's just like more of a what to say, a schematic representation than a graph itself. So in this case you just showing a particular, so for example this one in F, this is basically a statement which is been shown as a graph. So in this case it's like farm has animal, which is sheep, like this. So basically this is a more of a schematic representation than a mathematical representation of a graph as well. So let's skip this. We will not be more like, will not get much examples of these in our cases as well. So let's move on to weighted graphs. So in this case also you have five nodes, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, but the relationship between two nodes is the strength of the relationship between two nodes is denoted by the uh, uh, weight of the edges. So in this case, the most strong relationship between all these nodes are between 3 and 4, with the edge weight of 1, and the the lowest strength relationship between two nodes is between 3 and 2 and 4 and 5, which is with 0.1. So representation of these weighted graphs is a little important, because the weight of the edge will tell you the strength of the relationship between two nodes. So darker the edge or thicker the edge is basically denoting a more strong relationship compared to a slimmer edge. Okay, so yeah, these are what are known as weighted graphs. So let's come to bipartite graphs. So you have two sets of nodes, as I was talking about gene disease interactions. So you have genes which when mutated cause different diseases, and so you can take that example here. So let us consider 1, 2, 3 nodes are actually genes, and 4, 5, 6, 7 nodes are actually diseases. So you have two sets of different types of nodes. So on the left you have one set, on the right you have one set, and you have connections between these two sets of nodes, which is known as a bipartite graph. So yeah, we'll encounter these kind of graphs quite frequently in our examples as well. And then you have multi-edge graphs. So basically two nodes are connected by more than one type of edge. So these are also uh, like I'll not say fairly common, but we'll get examples of these in future classes as well. So yeah, these are known as multi-edge graph. So another type I want to highlight is the hypergraph. So I think I have, yeah. The definition of hypergraphs are basically you have a set of vertices and you have a set of hyper edges joining any number of vertices. So basically a very good example of this are biochemical networks. So if you imagine, so this is a reaction, for example, compound 1 is getting converted to compound 2, and this conversion is helped by, say, for example, different enzymes. So let us consider 1 and 2 as the biochemicals that are inside the reaction, and 3, 4, 5 are different types of enzymes that are influencing the reaction. So the edges do not originate from the nodes. The edges originate from the edge itself. So this is another type of example that we'll encounter a lot in our, in our cases. So yeah, and this is what is known as a hypergraph. So a good example of it is actually different types of biochemical reactions. So yeah, we have more different types of graphs. I'll not go into details of each and every one of them. I just wanted to give you an overview of how different types of graphs look like. Uh, Now we have different parameters on which describe the connectivity and basically the density of a graph. So one of them is basically what is known as connectivity. If it is a connected graph, it's basically uh, you can move from one node to another node, and it's all connected. If you just move from one node to another node, you go from the start to the end of the graph, and that is what is known as a connected graph. And a complete graph is known is basically where every pair of distinct vertices is connected by a unique edge, which is basically every node has a connection between its own. So an unique connection between its own. So that is what is known as a complete graph. Clique and clusters will come in the later slides. Okay. Uh, yeah, so and this is a representation of how we write about a graph. So basically we define a graph like this: g equal to v comma e, which basically a set of vertices which are denoted by v, and a set of edges which are denoted by e. And the v like we define this graph parameters in different sets. So basically v is a set, e is also a set, and this can be supersets as well. So this is how a representation of a graph like this looks like. So yeah, just wanted to put it out as an example. Okay, now we come to different parameters by which we describe a graph. So the first and the foremost parameter that comes to mind is the connectivity. Is basically how uh, two nodes, random two nodes inside a graph are connected, or are they at all connected or not. So this is a very fundamental attribute of a graph, which is known as a degree, and it is denoted by k, and it indicates the count of connections the node maintains with other nodes in the network. In case of directed networks, the degree comprises of two parts, which is the k in, which is basically the in degree. Excuse me. It is the in degree, and then you have k out, which is the out degree. So in degree is basically in directed graphs is the number of edges that are coming inside the node towards the node. So for example, for 2, the in degree will be 2, because there are two sets of edges coming towards the node, and the out degree will be 4. Sorry, out degree will be 1, which is basically one edge that is coming out of the node towards another node, which is the fourth node. So in case of directed graphs, if you sum up the in and the out degrees, you get the total degree of the graph or the node basically. So here are certain examples. So this on the left is an undirected network, on the right is a directed network. So as I was saying, you define the degree of a node degree is basically the number of links to other nodes. So, for example, you have the first node which is connected to two other nodes, 3 and 2. So, the degree of the node is 2. Then you have the second node which is connected to three other nodes, so you have k equal to 3, and so on. And number of links is basically given by uh, L, which is half of the total sum uh, of the degrees of all the nodes inside the network. So basically, so if you have, say for example, you want to find the number of links of for 2, so basically it's basically 1.5. So basically you have three edges coming out of three edges connected to that particular node, and you basically divide it by 2. And the average degree is basically when you sum up from I to n is the number of nodes, and ki is the individual degree of that particular node, and you sum that up and divide it by the total number of nodes, you have the average degree of all the nodes in the network. In case of directed networks, you have in degrees and out degrees, as I was saying, so you calculate them separately. So in this case, all the four nodes actually have, I think, no, so basically one has node number 1 has 1 in degree, 2 has 2, 3 has 0. So all the edges that are coming that are connected to node 3 are actually coming out of node 3, not going towards it. So like this, you calculate all the in degrees and the out degrees, and for the total degree you just sum up the in degree and the out degree. And uh, here also, for the total number of links, you calculate basically in here, since we are considering the in degree and the out degree separately, we do not need this half parameter here. So basically the number of links will be given by the total number of in degree or the out degree, so however you want to define. And here also, so we have the average degree in this case was 2L by n. In our case, since we are considering in and out separately, so and we are calculating L separately for in and out, so it's basically L by n. So this is the most actually fundamental parameter by which we judge a graph, by the degree. We like there are two ways to think about it. One is to think it from a point of view of a particular node. What is the average in degree or the out degree, or what is the average connectivity of that particular node? Or you can have it averaged out for all the nodes in a graph, and you can calculate what is the average in degree or out degree of a node in a particular graph, taking the whole graph into the context. So yeah. So once you calculate this degrees in degrees or out degrees, or the total degrees in case of undirected graphs, so you can make a degree distribution. So in any network, the degree of a node is the number of neighbors it has. Technically, by neighbors you mean nodes that are connected by edges uh, from that particular node. So the degree distribution of the network gives the number of nodes having degree d for each possible value of d. So you can have 1, 2, 3, 4 up to n number of degrees depending on your network. So for example, this on the right is a figure which is the degree distribution of Saccharomyces gene regulatory network. So it was observed that the degree distribution of biological networks follow a proper law. That is, the total number of nodes in the network having degree d is approximately CD, where C is a normalization coefficient and is a positive coefficient. In such networks, most nodes have small number of connections, except for a few nodes which have a very high connectivity. So the idea is very simple. So this is actually real life networks degree distribution. So as you can see, the total on the number on the left hand side is basically, you can sorry, on the y-axis you can imagine these are number of nodes, and on the x-axis you can imagine is the degree of each of the nodes. So basically you have a very high number of nodes with very low degree, and you have a very low number of nodes with very high degree. So this is actually something that is observed in real world networks, uh, that you'll in real world networks you'll have nodes which are more connected, less in number, and nodes which are less connected, more in number. That is the idea that I want to uh, get out from this particular slide. And yeah, so basically in real life networks, you'll have uh, no, the number of nodes having lower degrees at a much higher level, and the number of nodes having much higher degree at a very lower level. Very it can be very intuitive if you think about it. So for example, if you think of it of a gene regulatory network, or say for example a gene disease network, say for example. So if you imagine the different types of nodes being represented by genes and diseases. So for example, if you imagine a particular gene that is involved in a lot of diseases, the number of connections from that gene will be higher. So for the node that is represented by that gene will have a very high uh, degree. So think of it in a biological sense. So if that particular gene is somehow mutated, or if that particular gene is somehow knocked out, or something happens to the gene, a lot of diseases can emerge. So that is not actually very favorable from a biological point of view. So there also you'll have very uh, so the idea is to have a lower number of nodes with such high number of degrees, because if something happens to that particular node, a lot of the graph will get hampered. So talking in terms of biological sense, so a particular node is getting hampered, meaning a particular gene or a particular transcription factor is getting hampered, a lot of the gene regulatory network will be hampered, or a disease gene network will be hampered, and that is not actually favorable from a biological sense of view. So in real world networks also, you'll find this particular distribution, which is also, this is also known as the power law for basically graphs. So where you have very high number of nodes having very low degrees. So if something happens to the node, the whole network won't be affected. A very small part of the network will be affected, and there can be bypass nodes where you can where that node can be bypassed through other paths, and you won't have much of a problem. So biologically also it makes a lot of sense. Okay. Uh, so now, while the degree distribution provides only a limited snapshot of the network, it offers crucial insights into the structure of the network. So, in basic networks, nodes typically exhibit similar degrees as depicted in the initial pair of plots. So, basically, this uh, is a graph that is given in an example. So this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, these are different nodes in the network, and the edges connecting these two particular nodes are given by um, a, and in the subscript the numbers are given by the nodes it connect. So A12 is basically the connection between 1 and 2. A25 is the connection between 2 and second and the fifth node. So in basic networks, nodes typically exhibit similar degrees. So in most cases, you'll see the degree distribution is actually and quite similar to the power law as I was discussing, but most of the nodes will have similar degrees and like similar number of connections. So in basic networks, you'll notice this, but in real life networks, what is happen is you can have a diverse degree distribution, as I was showing here. So you'll have a lot of nodes with lower degree distributions. You'll have a medium number of nodes with medium to high degree distribution, and you will have very few number of nodes with very high degrees. So in such networks, the majority of the nodes uh, maintain relatively modest degrees, while a select few emerge as hubs with significantly higher degrees, establishing connections to numerous other nodes. So as I was saying, you will have a very few number of nodes with very high degrees inside the network, and those are termed as hubs. Now, if you think it from a biological perspective, sorry, one second. Yeah. So if you think of it as a biological perspective, say for example, you want to design a drug for a particular disease, and you see that a lot of related disease for the related disease for the disease that you are actually trying to find a drug for are actually connected to all of that on a single node. So basically, what I'm saying to say is basically one node. So, for example, a gene has a lot of degrees, and it is the connection of that particular node is very high. So, what it means in biological sense is basically that particular gene or that particular node is actually controlling a lot of diseases, a lot of factors inside the network. So from a drug development point of view, or from a targeted approach point of view, you would want to target that particular node because that has a lot of connections, and if you can manipulate that particular node, you can manipulate the whole network quite easily. So yeah, one of the major uh, research that goes on in network biology is to find these particular hubs inside the network, so which are sets of nodes which have very high connections. So these are the places in the network which actually control the behavior of the whole network, more or less. So finding these hubs and targeting these hubs remain of interest. So uh, one of the major mathematical scenario in graph theory is to find these particular nodes which have very high connectivity, and we call them as hubs, or basically places where we want to focus our attention on. So these high degree nodes, as I was saying, are commonly referred to as hubs, drawing an analogy to transportation networks, where major hub networks, major hub airports connect extensively with each other. So yeah, as I was saying, if you can find the hubs in the network, you can target the hubs in the network to control the network behavior very well. So this is on the right is actually an adjacency matrix of a network. So of this particular network, if I'm not wrong, yeah, I think it is this of this particular network only. So so on you can imagine this as a 2D plot, this matrix. So on the top you have nodes, say 1 to 10. On the x-axis you have nodes 1 to 10. On the y-axis you have nodes 1 to 10 again. And if there is a connection between, say for example, node 1 and node 2, you put a 1 here. If there is a connection between node 3 and node 4, you put a connection, so for example 3 and 6. So I think this is the third row and this is the sixth column, I think. Yeah, so you put a 1 here. So adjacency matrix represents it's a mathematical representation of the connectivity of a network or a graph, and each of these elements inside the adjacency matrix that can be defined by your own choice. So for example, since this is an undirected graph, I just want to represent which nodes are connected and which nodes aren't connected. So if it is connected, I'll put a 0. If it is connected, I'll put a 1, and if it is not connected, I'll put a 0. Simple. But say for example, this is a directed graph. So what will we do then? So if say for example, if it's a positive direction, if it is coming inside to that particular node, we'll put a +1. If it is going outside, we'll put a -1. This is just a convention. You can like reverse the plus and minus according to your preference also. So uh, representation of an adjacency matrix is very important because it highlights the relationship of different nodes inside the network. And 0 and 1 are binary values. So if it is present, we put it 1. If it is not present, we put it 0. But when there is the concept of weighted graphs, where there the weight between the connections is also measured, so we put certain weights to that. So for example, if it is a very highly weighted connection, we'll put it 1. If it's a medium weighted connection, we'll put it 0.5 or something like that. So we'll use the spectrum from 0 to 1 to denote what is the weight of the connection between two nodes. And if we just want to denote the relation, just the connection between two nodes, we just put it at 0 and 1. Just a second. Okay. Yeah. So yeah, and for this undirected network, so I've just written it down as I explained here. So you have different degrees for these different nodes. So for example, K1 has only one connection, so it's 1. K2 has 3 connections, so it's 3, like these. So uh, the degree distribution, if you compute the degree distribution for uh, 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 so in this case, how do we compute the degree distribution? We compute it in a PDF form. So PDF is like probability distribution function. So we do not directly plot the number of degrees. We what plot the fraction of the degrees of that particular node compared to the total number of degrees. So for example, uh, in this case, so the degree distribution will be like, so for p degree equal to 1, so for the first node it will be 2 by 5. So for for k equal to 1 there are sorry, sorry, I misspoke. So for example, I want to see how many of my nodes are with degree equal to 1. So we have 1, 2, 3, and 4, right? So k equal to 1, k1, k3, k4, and k10. We have 4 nodes with degree k equal to 1, and in total we have 10 nodes. So it's 4 by 10, which is equal to 2 by 5. So probability of getting a node with degree k equal to 1 is 2 by 5. Okay. Okay, so to answer the first part of the question, by looking at the matrix, you can tell if the graph is directed or undirected. If the graph is undirected, you'll only have positive parameters. So you'll either have 0 and 1 if it's a non-weighted graph, unweighted graph, and you'll have values between 0 and 1 if it's a weighted graph. But you'll never have negative values. So it's just for if you only have positive values in the adjacency matrix, you can say that it's basically an undirected graph, because there's only one directionality involved in that. If in the adjacency matrix you see both positive and negative uh, elements in the matrix, you can say like some of the connections are positive, some of the connections are negative, and there where the directionality comes in, so into the picture. Now, symmetric matrix indicate that the degree distribution is uniform across the network. So you have so if there is a connection between uh, uh, 1 and 2, there is also a connection between 2 and 1. So it's a bi-directional connection that you're talking about. Yeah. So yeah, you have different caveats of a symmetric matrix. So we'll talk about in the future classes. So just hold tight for that. I think I have a module for that in some of the future classes, if I'm not wrong. So but yeah, for the directed and undirected, you can simply look at the sign of the elements inside the matrix. If it is all positive, most likely it's an undirected graph, unless and until you have just taken a subset of the graph and only taken the adjacency matrix of the undirected portion of the graph. But if you have directionality involved, there will be positive and negative inside the matrix. Okay, so yeah, as I was saying, so the degree distribution is basically the fraction of nodes on the y-axis and the number of degrees in the x-axis. Just a second. No, I think somebody. Okay. Yeah. So in this case, you have four nodes with degree k equal to 1, uh, which is the first node. Then you have the third, fourth, and the 10th node, and you have 10 nodes in total. So it's basically 4 by 5, and if you just reduce it, it will be 2 by 5. Yeah. So similarly, you can calculate the probability of finding a node with degree k equal to 2. So you have, in this case, I think the fourth node, the ninth node, yeah, just two nodes with degree k equal to 2. So 2 by 10, which translates to 1 by 5. And now you calculate all of these. So basically, probability of finding a node with degree k equal to 1, k equal to 2, k equal to 3, k equal to 5, and so on, depending on which is the highest. In this case, it's k equal to 5. So, and then you plot the fraction, basically plot the probability of finding those nodes. So on the x-axis you have the degree, and on the y-axis you have the probability, basically the fraction of nodes having that particular degree. So that what brings up the degree distribution. So this is actually a very good example where you have a undirected graph. This is the adjacency matrix of that graph, and this is the probability distribution of the graph. See, here also you see the trend that I was showing you in the previous slide. So you have higher number of nodes with lesser number of degrees, and you have lower number of nodes with higher number of degrees. So in this case also this is followed. So you have more number of nodes with k equal to 1 and less number of nodes with k equal to 5. So that power this is known as the power law. This power law stands even here as well in this particular network. Okay. So moving on, paths and distances. Just give me 1 second. Yeah. Okay. So now that we understand the connectivity between different nodes in the network and what does degrees and degree distributions and everything mean, now we want to characterize what is the distance between two nodes. Firstly, first we want to see if it is connected or not. So that is given by the degrees and the degree distribution. Now we want to see how far are these two nodes apart in a particular network. So that you can have different parameters for these. I'll go into like the most important parameters for paths and distances. You can define n number of paths and distances, like according to your definition of a distance between two nodes. You can define it however you want to feel like. But two important uh, elements here are the characteristic path length, which is given by L, and it is defined as the number of edges in the shortest path between two vertices, and it is averaged over, basically it's divided by the total number of pairs of vertices. It measures the typical separation between two vertices in a network, and intuitively it represents the network's overall navigability. So there's also the concept of navigability in a network, is basically where you start from one node and you want to go to another node following the connections between different nodes. So I will talk about navigability a little bit later with Eulerian walk and stuff like that. But yeah, the characteristic path length gives you an idea about the whole uh, navigability between the network. So it's basically the number of edges in the shortest path between the two vertices. So for example, you want to go from node 1 to node 5, sorry, node 1 to node 4, which is you can go from go in a number of ways. So for example, you can go from 1 2 3 and 4. This is one length, 1 2 3 and 4. You can go 1 2 3, then you go back to 2 again, 5 4. You can go it like this because there is no direction involved here. You can move back and forth between two nodes. So you what you want is the shortest path between two two nodes. So I think this example will be better if you want to move from 1 to 5. So you can move from 1 2 and 5. Also you can move from 1 2 3 4 and 5, but the shortest path is 1 2 and 5. So there will be one thing I want to mention: the distance metric that we are using to define distances between two nodes is actually not reversible. So it's in most cases, in undirected graphs it will be reversible, because you can move from 1 2 and 5, you can move back to 5 2 and 1. So for example, you want to check the distance between node 1 and node 5. Since this is an undirected graph, you move from 1 2 and 5. You can distance between 1 to 5 and 5 to 1 is the same, because this is an undirected graph. Now imagine this was a directed graph. So imagine there is a direction between 1 and 2 and 2 and 5. That would be the shortest path, but there is no direction between 5 and 2. When you cannot move from 5 to 2. You can move to 2, you can move to 5 from 2, but you cannot move to 2 from 5. So whenever directionality gets involved in a network, when it's a directed network, the paths are not reversible. In most cases, in some cases it might be, in some special cases, but in most cases it's not. So there, the shortest distance between two nodes is actually direction based. So the shortest distance between 1 to 5 is not equal to the shortest distance between 5 to 1, but in case of undirected graphs it will be. So yeah, that is what a characteristic path length means. And there's another concept called the network diameter, which is the shortest path between two nodes in the network, and it also can be viewed as the uh, so basically what you want to say is, uh, two of the farthest nodes in the network, what is the shortest path between these two particular nodes. Now what now this is called as the network diameter. Intuitively, if you think, how do you define the diameter of a circle? The diameter of the circle is the shortest path between two extreme points in a circle. That is the shortest path between two points in a circle, two extreme points. Similarly, in a graph, the shortest path between two extreme nodes in a graph is known as the network diameter. So basically, this is defined as the length of the longest shortest path in the network. Longest because of the distance between the two nodes, because actually those two nodes are the farthest apart. And what is the shortest distance between these two farthest away nodes? So that is how you define the network diameter. So a network diameter will give you an idea about how distributed the network is, how wide the network is, if you can say, right? So in this case, the network diameter will be calculated between node 1 and 4, because these two are the farthest, and the shortest distance between 1 and 4 is like 1, 2, 3, and 4. It's the same as 1, 2, 5, and 4 in this case. The example is not correct for this one, but anyway, if you calculate the shortest distance between two extreme nodes of a network, that is what is known as the network diameter. Next, we come to another concept or another parameter by which we define a network, which is the clustering coefficient. So the clustering coefficient of an undirected graph is a measure of the number of triangles in a graph. Now, what is a triangle? If you imagine, a triangle will be three nodes which are interconnected. So if you assume three nodes A, B, and C, A is connected to B, B is connected to C, C is connected to A. So that is a triangle inside a network. So that is also what is known as a clique. You'll hear this term a lot in futures as well. So clique is also a smallest set of interconnected nodes, which can be minimum of 3. It can be 4, 5, but the minimum is 3, right? You can have 3 nodes which are interconnected to each other: A, B, and C. A connected to B, B connected to C, C connected to A. So this triangle is what they are defining as the number of triangles inside a graph, is what is known as the clustering coefficient. So intuitively, you can think of the clustering coefficient as a measure of the density of a graph. How dense is the graph? How well are the nodes connected inside a particular area of a graph? That is what the clustering coefficient gives you. So uh, it is defined like this. So the clustering coefficient of graph is defined as the number of triangles connected to node I by the number of triples centered around I. So we'll see it in this example here. So for example, in this case, say for you are interested in the ith node, and you want to find the clustering coefficient around the ith node. So in this case, your C, which is basically the your Ci, which is basically the clustering coefficient of this particular graph, is the number of triangles connected to this node. So in this case, this will be 1 here, 2 here, 3 here, 4 here. Sorry, yeah, I missed it. So 1 on the left two nodes and the I, 2 on the top two nodes and I, 3 on the right two nodes and I, 4 on the uh, bottom two nodes and I, right? We have 4 number of triangles that are connected here, and the number of triples that are centered around I are basically 4 as well. So you have 1, these three nodes are 1, these three nodes are 2, these three nodes are 3, and I think I missed one. Yeah, these three nodes are 4. So you have 4 by 4 here when you're calculating clustering coefficient. Number of triangles connected will be 4, and the number of triples that are centered around that particular node will be 4 as well. So in this case, your Ci, which is the clustering coefficient, will be 1. So yeah, this is how the clustering coefficient of a particular node is calculated. Now if you want to find the clustering coefficient of the whole graph, you add this clustering coefficient of each of these nodes and you divide it by the total number of nodes, which will give you an average uh, of the total clustering coefficient here. So in this case, you have 4 such in this case, basically your Ci, if you calculate it for all of these individual nodes, will be each of them. This is a fully connected graph. If you look carefully, there is no more connections available. So this is a fully connected graph. Sorry, just admit. Just a second. I just yeah. Okay. Yeah. I hope you can see my screen. Yeah. Yeah, so on the left is a fully connected graph. So in this case, your clustering coefficient for the particular node and the whole graph itself will be the highest, which is equal to 1. So by definition, your clustering coefficient should vary between 0 and 1, with the highest being 1, which means the node is fully connected. There is no more connections left. And it's basically, if you remove certain connections, the clustering coefficient will fall, and the overall clustering coefficient will fall as well. So as I was saying, the clustering coefficient intuitively gives you the density of a graph, or how connected a graph is. If all the possible connections are there, your clustering coefficient will be 1. If certain are missing, it will be less than 1, greater than 0 obviously. And in this case, you see it's not at all connected at all. So you have only the central node which is connected to all 4 nodes, but there are no connections at all. So in this case, your Ci will be 0, which the number of triangles connected to node I will be 0. So you do not have triangles forming. For a triangle to be formed, you need connections between these nodes. So in this case, it's not a connected graph at all. So clustering coefficient, as I was saying, it will give you an idea about how densely connected a particular area. One thing again, we do not calculate clustering coefficient always on the whole graph. In most cases, we want to find clustering coefficient on particular parts of the graph. So if you remember, we were talking about hubs. Yeah, we were talking about hubs, which are basically high degree nodes inside a network, which are few in number. So you want to find what is the clustering coefficient of those particular nodes. If it is 1, that means it's a very important node. If it's a hub and its clustering coefficient is 1, it's a very important node because it's connected all around it, and it's heavily involved in that particular gene or particular phenotype, disease, whatever you want to look at. It's very heavily connected. So those are very important nodes. So clustering coefficient gives you an idea about how well they are connected. Yeah. Okay, so another parameter to judge a graph by, it's basically closeness centrality. So what it is basically the farness or the peripherality of a node V, and it's defined as the sum of the distance to all other nodes. The closeness is defined as the inverse of farness. So for example, it will be it's the inverse sum of the distances between two nodes summed together. So it's basically, as I was saying, the path between node 1 and node 2 is not the same always. So you can have multiple of these different paths. If you take the sum average of all these paths and you inverse it, it's basically what gives you the closeness between two nodes. So you take all the distances that are possible between two nodes and you sum them up, and and you inverse them, and that is what gives you a particular that is what gives you the closeness between two nodes. So uh, yeah, this is quite intuitive. What it means is basically what is the average distance between two nodes in an inverse form. So yeah, I'll not go more deeper into this. Okay, now this is something that is actually quite important and quite common, which is the betweenness centrality. Um, Now, what it is, it's basically quantifies the number of times a node acts as a bridge along the shortest path between two other nodes. Now, imagine you have three nodes A, B, and C. Now, let's imagine it's a simple graph. A is connected to B, B is connected to C. So you have three nodes and you have two connections, A to B and B to C. Now, the shortest distance between A and C will be through B, right? If you want to move from A to C, you have to move through B. Now, imagine this in the context of a wider, bigger graph. So, what betweenness centrality is giving you is the number of times one particular node, in this case the B node, acts as a bridge between the shortest distance between other two nodes, A and C. So in a bigger graph, there will be a lot of paths between A and C. In how many cases does B appear to be in the path between A and C? This is what the betweenness centrality gives you. So intuitively thinking, it gives you what is the number of times a particular node is acting as a bridge between two other nodes, is as a connection between two other nodes. So from a biological sense, if you think, say for example, there is a gene, there is a phenotype, and there is a transcription factor in between. A gene can influence a phenotype without the transcription factor. A gene can influence a phenotype with a transcription factor. Now, let's say there are 5 different paths between the gene and the phenotype, and 4 of them actually pass through this particular transcription factor. That means more often than not, the transcription factor is involved in expressing that particular phenotype. That transcription factor is very important for the gene to uh, to express that particular phenotype. So that, intuitively thinking, that particular node becomes very important because it acts as a bridge between the other two nodes, right? So yeah, that is what it intuitively means. Just I think if you think about graph theory concepts in an intuitive manner, what it actually means, these different types of parameters, I think understanding these parameters will be much easier, right? You have to understand why we need these parameters. Why do we need betweenness centrality? Why do we need closeness? Why do we need other things? So just to quantify the importance of a particular node. And why do we need to quantify an importance of a particular node? To actually do something with it, like to target that particular node. In many cases it will be gene or transcription factors or proteins, whatever it is. If we get to know in a particular situation that this particular node is very important, be it whatever biological element it is, it becomes very easy to transact it, basically to counteract it, right? So from a drug discovery perspective, say from a vaccine development perspective, from a gene editing perspective, those particular nodes become very important because those are controlling a lot of expression around itself, right? So yeah, uh, actually the betweenness centrality concept comes from social networks or communication networks, and it's actually like if you have interest in graph theory, please go and look up social networks and how social networks work. It's actually very brilliant, including like social network websites like Facebook and Instagram, and how this actually work. These work on graph theory concepts, and these so for example, you see find friends on Facebook, how it actually like predicts that this might be a friend of yours that you want to send a friend request to. How the algorithm predicts through different graph concepts is actually very interesting. If you are interested in those kind of things, you can take a look. And there's a good book as well, called Networks. I forgot the author name. I think I'll give it to you. I don't have the book in front of me right now. So there's a book called Networks, where actually it describes all types of networks and all types of its like applications in different fields, and it's very interesting. We are only seeing a part, we'll only see a part of these applications in for our cases, but in other cases, in say for example transportation networks, say social networks, these concepts are very very beautifully designed to give us a lot of information about different things. So yeah. So yeah, coming back, betweenness of a vertex in a graph with v vertices is it is computed as follows. The idea is intuitively how many times a particular node is coming in between the shortest distance between two other nodes. That is the idea. Now how it is computed? Say for example, you have for two pairs of vertices, for each pair of vertices S and T, you compute the shortest path between them. Sorry. Uh, yeah. Yeah. So for each pair of vertices, you compute the shortest paths between them. There can be multiple, 10, 12, 15, whatever. Uh, and for each pair of these vertices, determine the fraction of the shortest paths that pass through the vertex of your choice or vertex of your interest, and sum this over all the vertices. And more compactly, the betweenness can be represented by, so this, your delta st is basically the delta stv, sorry, is basically, let's talk about delta st first. So delta st is the total number of shortest path from node s and t, total numbers, like that can be 12, 15, whatever number. And delta stv is the total number of paths, shortest paths between s and t that pass through that particular node v that you are interested in. So it'll give you a fraction of most it'll always be less than 1, and the value will be a fraction. Higher the value, that means that that node of interest of yours, which is v here, is actually a very important node in if you want to go from node v, s and t. Your node v is very important. Higher the betweenness centrality, lower it is, that means you can bypass that node to go from, in most cases you can bypass that node to go from s and s to t, right? So that is what betweenness centrality means. Okay, now we have talked about a lot between traversing between one node to another node, right? So that traversing is also a very important phenomenon for networks, because traversing in a network will basically tell you how you can reach from one node to another, right? So we have different parameters, as we discussed about between centrality and those kind of things, to tell you about different importance of different nodes in traversing. But how do we traverse? One of them, there are many ways you can do this. So one of the most like widely used method, and like most uh, uh, compatible methods you can call it, is a random walk. So what is a random walk? Random walk is a stochastic or a random process, as the name describes, which describes a path that consists of a succession of random steps on some mathematical space. So you are given a graph and a starting point, and you select a neighbor at random, and then you move to the selected neighbor, and you repeat the same process till a termination condition is verified, and or you reach a particular node. So there needs to be some termination condition, and you start from a node. You start from a node, you move to the next node with a certain probability that will depend on certain number of things. We'll talk in the next slide. But you take a node, you move to the next node through connection, and you move to the next, you move to the next, to the next, like this you go on until a particular termination condition is verified. That can be reaching a particular node, that can be traversing a number of nodes, whatever your condition is, that can be that is fulfilled, right? So we see this is what is known as a random selection, sorry, this random sequence of points selected in this way is called a random walk of the graph, right? A random walk with restart basically is what the name suggests. It's like you go from one point to another, your termination condition is verified, and then you restart again in another way, right? So random walk with restart is a method that studies the network vicinity of gene protein seeds to study their functions, right? This method is based on the idea that nodes related to similar functions tend to be close to each other in the networks. And in other applications, random walk is exploited to model different scenarios in mathematics and physics. That is, example, Brownian motion, statistical mechanics. In computer science, random walk is used to model epidemic diffusion of information, generate random samples from a large set, compute aggregate functions on complex sets. I'll give you another example after the next slide. I think that will be more relevant for our case. Okay, so actually I'll give this link here. You can take a look in this particular page, and they describe random walk very well. So if you can go to this GitHub link and take a look for yourself. I've taken the whole concept from basically the slides from there only, so you can go and take a look there. So uh, what is how do we do this random walk? So for example, let's start with this particular graph. You have a graph with v vertices and e edges, and it's a non-bipartite. Basically, only you have one type of nodes. You do not have multiple types of nodes, and it's not separated in any way. Excuse me. The random walk converges to a unique stationary distribution with any starting point. Now, more specifically, when we perform random walk on G from node V, we first move to the neighboring nodes with a probability which is the inverse of the degree of V. So, for example, if you move from this first node, you say, for example, randomly you move to node 2. What will be the probability of moving to node 2? It will be 0.5. Why? Because there is another path connected here. So the degree of the node, so for example, let's say node 3. If you move from node 3 to node 4, what is the probability you move from node 3 to node 4? It's going to be 1 by 3, because there are the total degree of that particular, 1 by 4. The total degree of that particular node is 4. It is connected to 1, 2, 4 and 5. So what is the probability you move from 3 to 4? It's 1 by 4, right? So the probability of moving from one node to the other node is given by the inverse of the degree of that particular node, right? And by the probability rule, we move from one node to another. Say, for example, take this particular iteration of random walks, right? So you are in node 1. Your probability of staying at node 1 is 1. Let's assume this. Now from 1, where you can move to node number 2 or node number 3, right? Each of this probability is 0.5, right? Now in the second iteration, you want to move from actually it's actually written here. Okay, so the probability to walk to each node in each iteration is listed here, and you start with the initial point, which is node 1. In iteration 1, you can move to node 2 or node 3, right, with equal probability, which is 0.5. Then in iteration 2, you move from node 2 and node 3 to their respective neighbors. So you are here or here. Where can you move to? From node 2, you can move to node 4 or 3. From node 3, you can move to 1, 2, 4 and 5, right? So from node 2, you can move to node 1 and 4, with each probability of basically 0.5. Okay. There is one condition to be verified here. So if you are in node 2, you are not moving. You are not moving to node 3 basically. So from 1 you started, you either move to 2 or 3, right? So if you move to 2, you are not moving back to 3, right? So if you are 2, you are moving to 4 and 1. So you have equal probability of 0.5, and which is divided by the degree of node 2, which is basically just a second, let me verify this. So you have okay. Yeah. So you have you started from node 1. You either move to node 2 or 3, each with probability 0.5, right? What is the next step? You can move to either node 4, or you can move to node 1, right? you're not moving to node 3 because that was the other probability, other consequence. So you've moved to node 2. Now you can either move to node 4 or node 1, back to node 1, right? So what is the degree of the node 2 for the in this case? In this case, it will be 2 because you're not moving to node 3, right? This connection you are not assuming. So the probability of moving from node 2 to node 4 or node 1 will be 0.5, right? Because it is the degree of node 2 is 2 in this case, not 3, because you're not assuming 3. So 1 by a degree of node 2 is basically 1 by 2, which is 0.5. Now you've already, your probability of moving to node 2 is 0.5. So the total probability will be 0.5 into 0.5, which is 0.25, right? Next, if you move from node 3, you can either move to node 1, node 4 or node 5. You have 3 choices in this case, right? But you have moved to node 3 with 0.5 probability. Now the total probability will be 0.5 into 1 by degree of node 3. You are not assuming you are moving to node 2. So 1 by 3 is basically 0.33, which is 0.5 into 0.33, right? So in each iteration, you move from one node to another with a certain probability, and you from that node you move to other nodes with certain probabilities as well. Now since these are independent events, just why are we multiplying these probabilities? That is also important, because these are independent events. We are assuming this to be independent events, so you multiply the probabilities, and for each iteration you get a probability of moving into a certain node, right? Now where is this how is this basically used in real life conditions? I'll give you one example. So I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with genome assembly. So in genome assembly, what we do is you have this short reads, because so for example, if you want to sequence a genome, you cannot sequence a genome in a whole. Like, it's, for example, in humans you have 3 billion base pairs of DNA. You cannot sequence one end to the other end at a stretch. There is no machines to do that. So you have to sequence short stretches of DNA, which can be like 150 base pairs, 300 base pairs, 1000 base pairs, in that range for short read DNA. Right? So what you do is you take the whole DNA, you replicate it multiple times, and you cut the replicated DNA in different parts. So you'll get reads which are overlapping with each other, right? So you sequence these individual reads. Now what you have is, after sequencing, you have sequences of particular reads, but you do not know where the read came from, right? You do not have any information where in the genome actually that read came from. So there you use this concept of random walk. So in that case, in each node will be represented by a sequence, and the next node, if there is a connection between node 1 and node 2, the next node will also be a representation of a sequence, but there will be some overlap between these two sequences, right? But then again, it will be like one node, you have another node which has certain number of overlap, you have another node which has certain number of overlap. So you'll have these options of moving from one node to another node, but you'll have all these nodes around you, and there will be a probability involved to moving to each of these nodes like this. So there you calculate, do this random walk. You start from one node and you move to the node which has the highest probability, and then you move to the node which has the highest probability. Like this, you go from one end of the node to the other end, and there you can, just walking through the whole graph, you can get the sequence of the whole genome, right? Yeah, please, you can speak or write in chat.
I have a question regarding the example you gave.
Yeah,
So in this, we try to find the highest probability to which the piece of DNA would have come.
yeah,
Is it based upon the the size of the overlap? It is overlapping to
yeah,
the other.
yeah. In most cases, so what we defined is a k-mud. K-mud is, k is the number of elements in the sequence. So you have, say for example, you're starting from one node, you have a length of DNA which is 10, and next, in the next two nodes, you have one, in one case you have an overlap of 4, in another case you have an overlap of 5. So most probably the overlap of 5 is a better match to your older DNA, So you move to that particular node. So in those cases, the amount of overlap is given by the weight of of the edge between the two nodes, right? In those cases, when you consider the probability, you'd consider the weight of the edge between two nodes. So if there is more overlap, there is more weight in the edge between the two nodes, the more probable that you move from that node to the node which has more overlap. Okay. Okay. So yeah, I think yeah, that's all for discussion on the things that was discussed for week 2. Now we'll move on to the questions. As we did in last class, I'll put up the questions for a minute or two on the screen, and you can answer in the chat box. We can discuss after that, right? Okay. 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 So again, reiterating, what is betweenness centrality? Betweenness centrality is a characteristic of a in some cases you are correct, it's of a node, but in general we describe betweenness centrality as an averaged out sorry, yeah, between an averaged out. So if you have say five nodes you are interested in, and it is following a path, and you want to see how these five elements are influencing the path between A and B. So in general, so the betweenness centrality of a particular, we define it as the calculation is of a particular node, that you are correct in that way, but in many cases you'll see is like you calculate the average of betweenness centrality of all of those nodes, and you give an average of the whole network. So it tells you what is the number of basically what in general, not from this question, in general it tells you what is the average number of nodes that are lying in between connections between two different nodes, right? So it gives you an idea about how two nodes in general are connected in a network, right? If you take two random nodes out of a network, what is the number of nodes that are in between those two nodes for for an average shortest number of paths. So that is what in general the betweenness centrality gives you. This question is a little weird. I get it. It is calculated in some sense. You are right. It is calculated on individual nodes, but in many cases you'll see betweenness centrality given as a measure of the whole network to tell you how in general in the network two nodes are connected are, and it gives you the number of shortest paths actually passing through the node. It's not actually what you are saying how connected the neighbors are. That is actually not betweenness centrality. That is actually the number of cliques or the clustering coefficient. That tells you how neighbors are connected inside a particular network. For betweenness centrality, it is focused on the number of shortest paths passing through that particular node. Right. This question is a little bit tricky. I apologize for this, but this is actually an older question from NPTEL. This question is not actually very well framed, but just to get the idea clear, betweenness centrality is always focused on the number of shortest paths that is passing between two nodes. It's not how well connected the two nodes are. That well, the connection between the connection of those particular nodes will be given by the click or the number of or the clustering coefficient of that particular node. It'll not be given by the betweenness centrality. Betweenness centrality has got nothing to do with those two particular nodes. Betweenness centrality is defined on the third node, which is actually in between those two nodes, right? How if it is passing through the shortest path or not, right? So please don't get confused. This question is a little bit confusing, I agree. So yeah, I'm just skip this over, but I hope I gave you the correct I could make you understand what it actually means. Betweenness centrality always is a measure of a third node and how that node is between two other nodes, not actually how these two nodes are connected, right? Because we are only talking about shortest paths, nothing else. Okay. Okay, sorry, I missed this messages. Neighbors of the node by total number of possible connections between neighbors of the node. No, not actually. So this question about the clustering coefficient, I don't think it translates to the same. Um, I have to see the mathematics behind it, but I don't think it translates to the same. Because I just quickly go back to that clustering coefficient slide. Yeah. So what it means here is basically you have got to count the total number of nodes which are fully connected, right? In this example, coming to this example again, in this example, what does the number of triangles actually mean? The number of triangles mean that's the smallest connected component of a graph, right? What clustering coefficient is giving you is basically, it's like how it is computed is basically the total number of connected components in a graph by the total number of possible connections. That is what the clustering coefficient is giving you. So if you have a network with all possible connections present for all possible number of nodes, your clustering coefficient will be 1. But what you are asking is, if instead of this you want to calculate it on the basis of the total number of connections by the total number of nodes, it does not actually translate to that. What here they are asking you is to count the total number of individual connected components. So you are already assuming in a clustering coefficient, you are already assuming that there are connected components across in around uh, your your particular node of interest. So what you're counting is the total number of connected components, not the total number of nodes. You're counting the total number of connected components by the total number of possible connections. It is giving you if it is fully connected or not fully connected. I don't think it actually translates to what you said. So yeah, I don't think that can be translated to this, right? And the second question, just I'll come back to the question once I go through the comments here. Okay. Pharmacology, right? Okay. Um, so obviously, as I was talking about, network biology is very much uh, involved in drug development. So for example, as I was talking about hubs and inside the network, how you can target them for drug development and all. See, I don't have that background for pharmacology and everything, but what I can do is I can like read up a little bit and I can give you some resources like maybe a few papers. Also, uh, you can do one thing. Uh, you can mail sir, right? Sir Karthik Raman sir. Actually, you can mail him saying that you have interest in this and what are the different resources that you can study for this, because he'll have better idea to help you out in this than me, because I am not like, I do not have a background in pharmacology. I have a background in biotechnology, biostatistics, bioinformatics, a bit of computer science. Um, uh, that is all. Pharmacology, I obviously like I'm aware of different uh, applications of network biology to pharmacology, but I'll not be maybe the perfect person to guide you about how actually to go about it. So I can obviously like try and give you some materials and some resources to help you out, but I don't think I'll be the perfect person to help you out with this. Maybe you can talk to sir, like you can write him a mail. His email ID is publicly available in his website and his in his department website as well. So maybe you can write to him. But if you want help from me, I can also try. Maybe give me some time, a week. Maybe next week I can uh, yeah, probably I can discuss a few concepts there. But since I am not from that background, I'm not sure if like I'll be the perfect person to help you out with this. But Yeah, I can. Yeah. Okay. Which colleges will have courses in competition? Okay, I'm not sure about the courses offered, but yeah. So, for example, this course actually, computational systems biology, is actually a course of IIT Madras, which they do, and that is recorded for in this case. Uh, in most cases you won't have systems biology courses, so how I studied systems biology is through online courses only. So there is a very good course on Coursera as well of Professor Ravi Iyengar. He's one of the stalwarts of systems biology, from Mount Sinai School of Medicine. So I, maybe you can look up different online courses. I'm not sure about normal colleges having computational or systems biology. Computational biology, you have computational biology is a much more broader field where you have different umbrellas of bioinformatics. You have different types of omics technologies and everything. Computational biology is a very vast field. Systems biology uh, is something that is, I'm not sure if it is taught in college. So in I studied at I did my bachelor's and master's from NIT Durgapur, but in there also it was not uh, there. So in most cases it won't be there, but you can try finding out. I'm not sure. Yeah, and yeah, for you, my this is my email address. Okay, let's. I think let's go back to the questions. Okay. Uh, okay, so I think let's see the answers first. I think BCT you have answered. Okay. Okay. Clustering coefficient. First of all, let's go through the options one by one. Clustering coefficient cannot be any integer. It will be varying between 0 and 1. So first option is wrong straight away. Second option, clustering coefficient of a node can be 0. It is possible in the example that I showed in the slide as well. There is a clustering coefficient of a node can be 0. Clustering coefficient of 1 shows that the graph is complete and it's completely connected. There is no more connections left. So that is how you define a complete graph. So clustering coefficient of a graph shows that the graph is complete. And the final option, so B and C are already correct. The final option, clustering coefficient of a node, signifies how clustered the rest of the nodes in the network are. No, it's basically, it signifies how connected that node is to the rest of the nodes around it, and how the nodes around it in are connected to each other. So it does not give you the clustering coefficient is not a, here also, like do not get confused between measures of a node and measures of a of a network. So you can extrapolate measures of a node to a measures of a network by averaging out for all the number of nodes, but clustering coefficient generally is significant of basically node and the nodes around it. So not technically the rest of the nodes in the network. It does not give you an idea about uh, a clustering coefficient of a particular node does not give you an idea about the rest of the network. It only gives you an idea about that node and the nodes surrounding it, right? So yeah, just please don't get confused in these terminologies, right? So you can have things. So in most cases, your measures of a node can be extrapolated to measures of a network, but it by averaging out. But in some cases, it does not make sense. So if you calculate for one node, it will only give you for that node and information about that node, and in this case clustering coefficient will give you information about the nodes that are surrounding it, no more than that. Okay, so yeah, moving on. just check if there are other comments or not. Yeah, this is correct. So more number of cliques here. Cliques are the smallest connected component, which is three nodes connected to each other. So this has the most number of these small connected components. So yeah, this basically these are known as cliques. And for the largest connected component, you have these bigger elements. So I, A, G, F, E, D, K, then you have L, A, B, A, C, D. So these are all connected to each other. So the largest connected component is given by the, like, basically it's the largest connected component, and the smallest connected component will be these individual elements. So in both cases, it has the largest connected component as well, and it also has the maximum number of smallest connected components as well. So yeah, correct answer. Let's move on. And largest clique is back largest connected component. Smallest clique is smallest connected component. Just to standardize the terminology. Okay. Okay. I also do not know the answer to this. I have to check. Okay. So uh, a clique is defined as a part of the network which is fully connected. Now, I assume that the people who have reported 7 or 8, you're calculating these, right? But imagine, so let's take this part of the network, right? Is it fully connected? Are there connections between H and K, H and F and D, I and D, G and E? Like there are 7 or 8 elements here, but they're not fully connected to each other, right? A clique is a fully connected component, right? This was the largest connected component. This is a connected component, but this is not fully connected, right? Because there are edges missing between different nodes, H and K, H and F and D, say for example D and B. These connections are not there. This is a larger connected component, but inside the component these are not fully connected. The clustering coefficient of all these nodes will not be equal to 1. The only place where the largest So basically, the largest interconnected component is present is this part. You have 4 elements here, and 4 of them are equally connected. There is no more connections left here. You cannot do more connections in this part of the graph. But here, you can do. So clique is the fully collected component of the largest connected component. In this case, they are asking that. So there is a connected component and there is a fully connected component. The fully connected component is the clique, and the connected component is just a connected component. It can be a largest connected component, it can be a smallest connected component. But when you are defining a clique, the number of connections should be exhaustive, right? Which is true in only this case, not these cases. And this case also it's true, but it's since it's the number is lower than this, the answer is not this. This is the answer, but this is not the answer because there are connections missing, right? I'm hope I'm clear, right? Any confusions here? Okay. So when you are asked about a clique, always look for exhaustive connections. Like you cannot make more connections in those places. That is what a clique means, right? You cannot make more connections here, but you can make more connections here, right? A clique is where there is exhaustive connection. So this is a clique, this is a clique. Individually these are cliques. 8j and j are clique. Sorry, 8g and j are clique. ijk is a clique. jfe is a clique. But this whole component, if you imagine, this is not a clique because certain connections are missing inside here. Okay? It's not fully connected. So yeah. Okay, I hope I'm clear. Yeah, the answer is 0 because there are no cliques associated around it. So yeah, straightforward. Okay, the answer is it's a straight line in logarithmic scale, but it's actually a power law distribution in practice. But if you convert it in logarithmic scale, it will be straight line. Just give you example here. It's a power law distribution looks like this, as I was mentioning. Yeah. So this is a power law distribution, and it's basically, if you take, this is a logarithmic curve. If you take a log value, it will be a straight line, like this, negative slope. So yeah, it's actually a straight line in logarithmic scale, but it's this type of distribution is actually a power law distribution. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Yep. So we talked about adjacency matrix as well only, but adjacency list and incidence matrix can also be used to show. So this was a multiple option correct anyway. I'll show you. Yeah. So this is how you can represent it as an adjacency list. So instead of a matrix, you make it a list with connections, right? So this is how an adjacency list looks like. It's just a different representation. The idea is very the same. If it is connected, you have a 1 or a 0 for a unweighted graph, and if it's not sorry, if it's connected, it will have a 1. If it's not connected, you will have a 0. So in computer science terms, you'll basically represent this is as a linked list when you are doing an adjacency list, but it's the concept is the same. And the other one is incidence matrix. Incidence list is also there. So uh, what to show. Second. Yeah, this is an incidence list, right? So you have these are your A, B, C, D are your nodes on the y-axis, and 1, 2, 3, 4 are your edges. So if A is connected to this edge, it will be a 1. It's basically adjacency matrix and adjacency list is basically you have the set of nodes in x and y axis. If they are connected, you put 1 or 0, right? So it's a relationship between the nodes. Here it's the relationship between the nodes and the edges. So yeah, if you have these are your edges, these are your nodes, and if this edge is connected to node A, it will be a 1. Edge 2 is not connected to node A, so it will be a 0. Edge 3 is connected to node A, it will be a 1. Again, edge 4 is connected to node A, it will be a 1. So these are all different forms of representation, but the idea is the same. You put in a particular value if it is connected. If you don't put you put a 0 if it is not connected for an unweighted graph. So yeah. Sorry, I did not cover this, but yeah, these are different. Even incidence list is also a type of data structure. So these are different types of data structures in computer science terms. These are data structures which you can use to represent a particular graph, right? So you can have different types of representation. No, I think this we have done. Yeah. It's actually characteristic path length. Again, these are very the questions are very like, what to say, these are like, the terminology gets mixed up. uh, Out of all of the four, degree you can calculate for a node, clustering coefficient you can calculate for a node, betweenness centrality also you can calculate for a node. You can extrapolate all these things to networks, but individually for nodes you can calculate. But characteristic path length is not a node property, it's a network property, because the distance between two nodes is not a property of these two nodes itself, right? It's nothing, got nothing to do with these two nodes, it's got to do with all the nodes that are in between. So that's a network property, that's not a node property, right? So all of the other three you can calculate for nodes. Characteristic path length you can calculate for two nodes, but it actually does not depend on those two nodes. It actually depends on the nodes that are in between, how densely they are packed or not, right? So these kind of questions you'll also find in your exam. So just think about it, like what exactly are they asking, and sometimes these questions can be framed in a tricky way. So please read the question carefully and try to understand the question, what it exactly is asking. For all the four characteristics, except for the fourth one, all the three characteristics you can calculate for one particular node. Characteristic path length is between two nodes, but the nodes have got nothing to do with the path length. It's all what is in between the two nodes, right? I hope I have made my thing clear. Okay. Yeah. Just a second. I think I'll move into this question. See, here they're asking the clustering coefficient of the whole network, right? Yeah, I think, yeah. So course enrollment, I'm not sure about this. You have to ask the NPTEL people. I'm not actually involved in the administrative side of things. I just take these live sessions. Um, I'm not sure if it is over or not. Please ask the NPTEL people. Drop them a mail. They'll help you. Okay. Okay. So if you have been asked the clustering coefficient for uh, the whole network, right? So the idea is to find it for one uh, node, add them up for all the nodes, and divide it by the total number of nodes, right? So for one node 1, it's 1 because it's fully connected. The clustering coefficient is 1. For 2, it's 1 by 3C2. So you have three components that are three elements, sorry, three nodes that are connected to 2, and the total possible connections are 3C2. So 1 by 3C2, which is basically 1/3. 3, it's not a connected component because there are no individual connections here. So why I have taken 1? So 1 is for this connected component, and there can be disconnected component, that can be disconnected component. So this 1 is for this one, right? And 3C2 is the total number of possible connections with the three nodes that it is connected to, right? So it's 1 by 3C2, it's 1/3. For third, there are no connected components because 4 and 2 are not connected, even 3 and 5 are not connected, so it's 0 for 3. For 4, again it's also 0 because 3 and 5 or 4 and 2 are not connected, so it's also 0. For 5, there is one connected component. This is like 1 to 5, this one again. 1 by, again, 3C2 because 3, there are 3 nodes connected to 5 and the total number of possible connections are 3C2. So 1 by 3C2. Now you have 1, node number 1 has clustering coefficient 1, node number 2 has 1/3, node number 5 has 1/3 again. Now you do an average, 1 plus 1/3 plus 1/3 divided by the total number of nodes, it's 6. 6 also does not have, I have not considered 6, 6 is 0 as well. So divided by 6, which is like 5 by 18, which is around 0.27. So yeah, the answer, someone I think wrote the answer correctly. So yeah, it's right. I hope you understood the method. So for each node, you calculate the clustering coefficient, which is the total number of total number of cliques by the possible number of connections. Right? So yeah, this is how it is calculated, and yeah, answer is 0.27. Okay, let's move on to this question. Do we have any answers yet? Let's see. Okay. So you're told okay, random network is constructed such that a pair of nodes is connected with a probability of 0.4, and you are asked the question, what is the expected number of possible edges if there are 100 nodes? So if the probability, if two nodes are connected with a probability of whatever p, let's consider p, and n is the number of nodes, so the total number of connections between n nodes is how much? N into n minus 1 by 2, which is basically nc2. nc2 is the total number of possible connections between n nodes, right? So uh, n into n minus 1 by 2 is the total number of possible connections between n nodes. Now on top of that, they are saying the number of possible connections is connected with a probability of 0.4. So there is p into nc2. So p into n into n minus 1 by 2, where n is the number of edges, p is the probability, and e will be your expected number of edges. So you just need to plug in the values. P is 0.4. You are given 100 nodes, so n is 100. 100 into 100 minus 1 by 2, which is like 0.4 into 50 into 99, which gives us 0.1980. So these are small tricks that you should remember, that if there are n nodes, the number of possible connections is always nc2. I know some of you do not have like like uh, some of you have come from biological background and like not maybe familiar with much of probability and say permutation and combination, but these are small tricks you need to remember. So if there are n nodes, the number of possible connection is nc2, and that is the number of expected number of edges, which is the number of possible connections. And if it's connected with a certain probability, you just need to multiply with that probability, right? So yeah, the answer is 1980, right? Okay. Okay, then okay, and any doubts in this? Understood, right? Okay. Let's move on. Okay, sparse is another term I don't think we have discussed in today's lecture. So sparse matrices are sparse, like you can like sparse is used for matrices as well as networks. So if if a network is sparse, it means the number of connections between certain number of nodes is very low. So it has very less connected components inside the network. So that is what a sparse network mean. A sparse matrix is the same concept, very less number of non-zero elements inside the matrix, and most of them are zero. So that is what is called a sparse matrix. So yeah, I wanted to tell you the meaning of the word sparse in this context. Okay, do we have any answers? B. Okay. Okay, so the um, okay, so I myself am a little bit confused. Okay, weighted is fine because we have 3 and 5 as edge weights, 2, 10, those are fine. But I cannot see a negative element here. So I'm not sure about directed. Sparse is fine as well because most of the connections are not there. But I'm not completely sure about the weight directed thing. It's somebody how did you guys say it's directed? Because it's not symmetric. But okay.
If like the upper and the lower triangle, if both are
Hmm.
symmetric, then it will be undirected, and
Hmm. Hmm.
both way we can from one node to other node. If it is undirected, I think
Yeah.
that's why.
Yeah. Yeah. Correct. 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 Now, I was thinking of like maybe we can have like if we have some like opposite directed directions as well. So this is another representation. So basically, you can represent the directions with positives and negatives, and also with asymmetric ones. Yeah, I just forgot about that. Yeah, correct, correct. It's actually correct. Thank you for the answer. Okay, I think that's it. I think rest of the questions are older anyway, so let's not go into those. Okay, that's it for today. So I hope I've at least given you certain ideas about how these things look like. And yeah, just be a little bit careful about terminologies between nodes and networks, which one is specific to nodes, which one can be extrapolated to networks, and so on. So yeah, any more questions, or we can close this session? Okay, then, thank you. uh, we'll meet in the next class, same time. Okay, bye bye. Stop the recording.